Welcome to the Ground Pwned Podcast, a weekly show for fans of combat sports, gaming, entertainment, and plenty more. I'm Scott Fontana, the New York Post's MMA reporter, joined by Brian Shea, the senior editor at Game Informer. Brian and I are all locked in on UFC 273, especially a week after crazy busy UFC schedule finally, gave us a reprieve here. And with three big fights on tap, two of them for championships, that's definitely what we're going to be spending most of our time on, Brian, right? So let me start with you before we kind of dive into how I feel about this. Which of these three big fights are you most looking forward to? There's Alexander Volkanovski against Korean zombie Sung Jung for the featherweight title. There's Aljamain Sterling, the bantamweight champion, against the interim bantamweight champ, Petr Yan, and an awesome welterweight fight between Gilbert Burns and Khamzat Chimaev. Which of these three are you most pumped for?
Oh, man. All three of these fights are very easy to get excited for. However, I'm bouncing back and forth between Sterling Yan and Burns Chimaev, and for completely different reasons. Sterling and Yan, I just want to get the bantamweight division in order. I want to get it back and moving through this log jam that we've had at the top.
Yes. I wrote so extensively about that this week, actually.
There's so much talent at 135, and I just want to get the rightful champion crowned and move things along. Like, if that's Aljamain Sterling, amazing. If that's Petr Yan, even better. Maybe not even better, because I like Aljo a lot. But I want us to move along, and I want us to get this out of the way. But then you look at Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev, and this is the guy that we've been hearing about all throughout the pandemic now is like, this guy is the new hotness. He's the next big thing. He might be a 2-division champ without even having to get a championship and then petition to go up and fight the next guy. He might just work his way through both rankings as an organic challenger. At one point we were thinking that.
For whatever reason, just you talking right now, it kind of about Khamzat, it reminded me of the way people regarded, I don't know if you guys all remember Hansel, who was so hot right now from Zoolander. He's so hot right now that Khamzat.
Played by Owen Wilson.
Yes, indeed.
But yeah, so I think that as a pure fight, excited to see the outcome type of situation, it might be Burns Chimaev, and that's just because I want Gilbert Burns. I have immense respect for as a fighter, and I really think that he is going to be a good challenge for Khamzat. Although I don't know, I see Gilbert as I think Khamzat. If I had to pick straight up, I would think Khamzat's going to win. But when I see the betting lines for this fight, and Gilbert is a huge underdog and Khamzat is a huge favorite, I'm I don't know. I would pick Khamzat. I don't know if I would pick him that confidently. But basically, I'm excited to see if he is everything that he is hyped up to be. And this is Li Jingliang. That was a great test, and he passed it with flying colors. This is just that next step. This is all right, I passed my midterm. This is the test before the finals. Sure. I feel and it's all right, if you pass this, you are good to take on the final test, which you would think would be a number one contenders bout or a championship fight if he finishes this in decisive fashion.
Look, if he finishes this decisively, I feel like we're talking about the very next challenger for the welterweight title, at the very least after the Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards fight that they seem to be planning for this summer. Although
it's not booked yet.
Look, it's not booked yet. You're right. But if for some reason that falls out, whether it's because they're waiting to see how this goes, or if Leon Edwards for some reason has to pull out or something like that, I think that's what you do. You bring him in and you put him for the title. It kind of reminds me of, if you remember way back when John Jones fought Ryan Bader right before he became the champion. There was this fight. It was on the undercard, actually, of when Anderson Silva fought Vitor Belfort, won with the front kick, which, of course, was taught to him, as we all know, by Sensei Steven Seagal, the greatest martial arts sensei of all time.
That's basically Vitor Belfort was maybe on TRT in that moment.
TRT tour, yes.
I think Anderson had the greatest performance-enhancing drug, Steven Seagal, on his side.
Definitely, absolutely. And he put Vitor under siege two times. No, he didn't. It was just once. But in all seriousness, though, it really does remind me of the John Jones against Ryan Bader fight, where it was like Bader, he was still a prospect, so it's a little different here than it was with Gilbert Burns, who is now a former title challenger, has been a pretty solid welterweight now for I guess a couple of years since he moved up. But there's a sense that like Chimaev could come in here and have like a really amazing performance and then not look back whatsoever. I do think that and this is not me counting out Gilbert Burns at all by any stretch. I think Gilbert Burns is most definitely his toughest challenge. He is now he's fighting someone. Khamzat is fighting someone who's again been in the title picture. He's been in the cage with the best, and he's hurt the best.
He had Kamaru on roller skates.
He did. And, how much of that is the familiarity there? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It happened. But there's a level to it, and he is taking that next step up, just like you're talking about. If he passes this one, it really is. It's going to tell us a lot. But I'm not willing to write Burns off because he's a danger in different areas that we haven't really seen Chimaev have to deal with, I guess, to the same degree. He can hit hard. First off, he's smaller. He's the size thing is a big deal in this fight because Khamzat looks like someone who realistically, we're talking about someone who's probably going to be a career middleweight pretty soon. I feel like that's just my read on it. I don't know how long he's going to be able to stay at 170.
He's a big welterweight. He's a big welterweight for sure.
He is a big welterweight. I could see a day coming where he's, he fights at 205. I have no idea how soon that would be, but he has the frame for it, I think. So if that happens, that's years down there. But, Gilbert Burns, he used to be a lightweight for a while. He was probably too big for lightweight, but he's kind of one of those, I feel like, tweener welterweights who really could benefit from a 165-pound weight division, Then he'd be like his ideal weight, I think.
Could you imagine if the 165 division came in when Khabib was reigning? Because, that was always a struggle for him to get down to 155.
It was
Imagine he just goes, I'm going to take 170 or 165 instead. And then he goes up and just reigns that. And it's like, all right, we have non-depleted Khabib. But then he'd also be taking on bigger guys. So I think that would make it a lot more interesting.
It probably would be a little more interesting. I still think his skill set was such that he would give basically anybody in the 155 to 170 pound range, like way too many problems.
I think it'd be fun to see him versus Colby. If Colby could make 165.
I think it would be fun too. And I think the reason I think it's fun is because I have a distinct feeling of how I think that fight would go. And I think it wouldn't go well for Colby. So I wouldn't mind watching that. That'd be okay.
So what is your read as a guy who, you were the MMA expert on this show.
Sure.
What is your read on these two title fights? Because I think that Volkanovski Zombie, for as fun as it could be, I think Volkanovski is going to run away with it. That's my read on this. And then Sterling Yan is going to be more competitive, but I do think that unless Sterling made some huge adjustments, he is going to have a difficult night with Petr Yan on the other side of the cage.
So I'll start with the main event, the featherweight fight with Volkanovski and Zombie. I think you're kind of right. I do feel like this is Alexander Volkanovski's fight to lose, so to speak. Not that Zombie's not dangerous. The guy, he can beat you in a lot of ways too. He can beat you on the ground. He can beat you standing. I think he looked really impressive his last time out as well. And I think that's the kind of thing that at very least, like, he's got some, I don't know if it's momentum, but he's got some confidence coming off of that nice win over Danny Gay. This is someone who's used to the spotlight. He has not fought in a non-main event in it's been a very long time. I think almost 10 years or something.
And for good reason, because he is an attraction. Like when he's fighting, you are tuning in.
He really is. And he actually, because obviously he does not speak English either. We get a personality, I feel like, from him. It doesn't, not really, but like he doesn't give you much, but there's something there with him that there's a little bit of a charisma, I think.
Mm-hmm. You
know what I mean? And I've spoken with him too. And even through a translator, you still get the sense this is kind of like a down to earth kind of interesting guy. He by the way, his favorite zombie movie, I had to ask him because he legitimately loves zombie movies. Like, It's not even like a joke. And his favorite movie is Train to Busan.
Okay.
I've never watched. I'm not a horror movie guy, so it's not really my thing. But like, is that a good? Have you watched that one? Or
I have. God, it's been a while. I think I've seen it. I haven't watched like zombie movies in a long time, but like I've either seen it and loved it, or like it's been strongly recommended to me, and I can't remember which one it is.
Has the zombie thing like died down? Because again, I really don't care about zombies.
A little bit. I mean, Resident Evil's still going strong. You've got several.
Well, there's things that aren't going to go away, but I feel like for a while everything was zombies.
Yeah, it definitely has died down from like the early 2010s.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah. We had like World War Z and everything like that. It was like everything.
While we're on the topic of Korean zombie, well, I was going to say Korean zombie in particular, where does his nickname rank pound for pound best nicknames in MMA?
Oh, it's up there. It's
I'm thinking top 5, and I don't
top 5.
have.
I don't have like a list in my head. So this is one that would require a lot more thought. I think
it does.
Yeah,
we might have to come back to this next week or something.
Yeah, I like it. Maybe we'll pose it to listeners and see what they think. But yeah, this is a good one. I mean, the
Korean zombie
is really up there.
But here's what really does it for me with Korean zombie. He comes out to Zombie by Cranberries.
Sure.
And it gives me goosebumps every single time. It is such a good walkout.
It is, but also I think that's just a song that for whatever reason is made for being like a good walkout song and giving people goosebumps, because I want to say it was Peter Queeley who walked out to it last year with Bellator in Ireland, and everyone in the arena was singing along with it, and that was haunting. It was amazing. So it actually topped, I think, what you get with Korean Zombie.
But he has like the zombie name built in. So
of course, look, he's got the motif, but I'm telling you, there's something about every single person there singing along with it. And I mean, enough that you heard it like alongside the music. It was amazing.
No, yeah, for sure. I am looking forward to that fight a lot. I'm looking forward to that walkout, as I indicated.
Yeah. But as far as the competitive balance of this fight, to get back to that, Volkanovski, he doesn't really get his due, I don't think, from the MMA community, because I think there's a lot of people who still feel like they're almost like burned by the fact that he won a very close fight against Max Holloway last time. Which, look, you can think that Max Holloway won 3 rounds. That is totally viable. You could, if you feel like saying he won 4 rounds. At this point, I don't think you're necessarily right. I think rounds 1 and 2 are definitely Max. I think rounds 3 and 4 are pretty squarely Volkanovski, and I think round 5 is a really hard one to kind of come up with a definitive winner there. And if you want to feel one way or the other about that fight, that's fine. But you got to give him his due. Even if you think that he lost to Max, we're talking about a super close margin of defeat in that fight.
Absolutely.
So if you think Max is one of the best, then you have to think pretty much the same thing of Volkanovski, who also had a very clear victory over Max once. And I think they can fight again. Like, I actually do think, even with the 2 wins, that a third fight is totally viable. It makes some sense, especially because they're definitively the 1 and the 2. No matter what, Zombie is in this fight, but he's not the number 2 guy at featherweight. He's just he's what, 3 or 4 or something like that behind some of the other guys who've had their shots. So yeah, I think he can be dangerous. I think he can have some moments here, but I think Volkanovski's movement is really going to be way too much for Zombie, who's, I think, just not quite dimensional enough in his striking to make a difference unless he lands like the big blow,
Yeah, and I was just looking back at how I scored Volkanovski Holloway 2, since we were talking about that and like how Volkanovski doesn't get his dues.
Mm-hmm.
I have it 3 rounds to 2. Alexander Volkanovski.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in that camp. I like it.
I am. Although, like, I agree. It is a razor thin decision. And Max is one of my favorite fighters. So it's like,
yeah,
of course I want to see him win. But I also feel like Volkanovski is a super good dude. And like, I don't mind that he is the champion of the 145-pound division. And I do like that, like, when he had a quote or something when like somebody was like, hey, like, we're going to have you fight Max again. Like when the third fight was like kind of like where they were going. He was just like, "You're just gonna have him fight me until he finally wins."
Yeah,
like
is that what
you're?
That's such a viable, like it's such a justifiable way for him to feel. Like even if you want that fight, and even if it does make sense from his perspective, if you're in his shoes, imagine if it's you who's sitting in his shoes saying, "I won twice," you'd say the same thing. And I totally respect him for saying it because it's the right thing to say.
Yeah, I think that Volkanovski is easily the rightful champion. I know there's a lot of people that think like Holloway is, but look what he did to Ortega, coming through so much hardship there. Like Volkanovski has more than proven himself. I was looking at his record. I'm going to bring it up here real quick. And he has not lost.
His only loss is at welterweight. He's the featherweight champion.
But like it was like 2013, wasn't it?
It's a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. His last loss was May 10th, 2013. We are getting close to him being undefeated for a full decade, taking out names like you got Darren Elkins, Chad Mendes, Jose Aldo, Max Holloway twice, Brian Ortega. If things go his way on Saturday, Korean Zombie. Like that's like, we give Tony Ferguson all the credit in the world, and rightfully so, for his lightweight run. But like, look at the names that he has on his resume.
He's beaten the two greatest welterweights of all time, other than himself, a combined 3 times.
Yeah, he
has a great win over Brian Ortega. I think that stands out a lot on his resume because it was such a gritty fight that he had to fight through that epic third round as well. So like, I think he checks all of the boxes. The only thing that he doesn't really check, if you're a fight fan and you're trying to maybe try to find reasons to nick him, as far as his resume, his record, what he has has accomplished, is he's not much of a finisher. He really is, I don't want to say a point fighter, but he hasn't really shown a lot of that fight ending instincts, power, inclination, whatever you want to call it, in most of his fights. He did finish Chad Mendes. That's an impressive thing, what he did there. But I think that was Chad Mendes coming off of his suspension. It had been a little while too. I'm not trying to make excuses, but realistically, yeah, he hadn't. Actually, that's not even true. He had come back against Miles Jury, his previous fight. So I take that back entirely. I don't even want to go down that road. But like, it's more the exception than the rule, is what I'm getting at.
And then remember how much heat Brian Ortega had coming off that Korean Zombie performance, where he just pieced up Zombie, and then he came into that fight. People are like, all right, this is Brian Ortega 2.0. And, Ortega had his moments, as we had said, like, he almost finished him twice.
In the third round, where he is always the most dangerous. That's where he gets his finishes oftentimes.
Well, he had he had a triangle choke, which is his signature move.
T-City, that's right.
Oh my gosh. And like, what was the other one? Was it it wasn't a guillotine, right?
Off the top of my head, I can't honestly remember. I didn't get the chance to watch back that fight because I did just about everything for the last several weeks on Sterling and Yan.
Let's get into that one then.
We can wrap this up. I don't want to like just change it if you had anything more you wanted to say on the fight.
No. I think that as much as I like both of these fighters, Alexander Volkanovski and Sung Jung, I think that of the top 3 cards on this fight, I'm looking forward to it the least, even though it's the headliner, even though it's 2 fighters I really love to watch.
Because you think it's more of a foregone conclusion, so to speak?
Yeah. Like, I think that like Volkanovski is probably going to run away with this one as much. I mean, and I would lose my mind if Korean Zombie broke through and became a UFC champion. But it just seems like the least likely scenario out of like the title change or the upset happening of these top 3 fights.
Sure. I don't know. I think I put this maybe on similar plane to like a Burns Chimaev situation. I'm pretty sure Chimaev is the favorite. I don't know what the lines are, to be honest.
Oh, Chimaev's a huge favorite.
I mean, that makes sense, I guess. Oh, that's right. You know what? I didn't know that. The line there, now I'm remembering. Thank you. The line there, I feel like speaks more to the respect and the hype that Chimaev has gotten to, rather than how close these two are as fighters, which I'm not a bettor, I'm not a gambler, and I'm not necessarily telling you what to do. But I would say this, when I see scenarios like that, it certainly makes sense to maybe lay down a few bones on, the underdog here, because you're going to have a bigger payoff than if obviously if the line was closer. But I think there's a more realistic chance that Burns can get the betting upset here than I think a lot of people are giving credit for.
Oh my gosh. I'm looking at the lines right now.
Okay.
Chimaev is as high as a minus 909 favorite.
Well, that's just goofy.
I mean, that's an outlier.
Yeah.
It looks like he's around like the 550 favorite.
Where is he at, like FanDuel and like DraftKings? I think those are probably
FanDuel is minus 550, and at his peak it was minus 650. Jesus. Burns, meanwhile, on FanDuel is a plus 390.
Yeah. So, for anyone who doesn't bet, I'll just translate for you that for you real quickly. The plus what, 350?
390.
390 plus 390. That means if you were to bet $100 on Gilbert Burns to win, you would win back. You would gain $390. If you wanted to win $100 on Khamzat Chimaev, you'd have to bet $550 just to get $100 back. So that shows you kind of the disparity between the two of them. They're just for non-gamblers, so they hopefully understand that. Because it's a weird thing. If you've never bet, especially on money lines and things like that, no one really understands it, and so you hopefully explain it to them. Hopefully that helped anybody.
I was looking up prop bets, and it brought up the most complicated sheet of just different outcomes that could occur. I was going to say, let's see if there's any fun prop bets. But this is just indecipherable.
I understand them, but I've looked them over and tried to understand it, but I'm just not really not a huge bettor.
But the most expected outcome, according to the these different lines, is fight ends within the distance is a 71% likely outcome, and then the most likely method of victory is Chimaev wins by TKO or KO, which is at 46%.
Yeah. I mean that sounds right as far as what they would do. I'm not saying necessarily that would happen. I don't really want to make a pick or anything like that because it's tough. But but to kind of get back to the central point and close off these two fights, so we can move on to Sterling Yan. I just think that there is certainly a realistic chance for either Burns or Zombie to win, but you know what? I think Zombie would probably make sense to me as the biggest surprise if he were to win. Of the three, I think he would surprise me most.
I think for me it would be probably Korean Zombie. Be the biggest surprise for me if he won out of those three.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I almost said Burns just because Chimaev has all this hype around him, and that aura more or less gives me the confidence in Chimaev.
That's where the line is coming from, because of this the belief there. But I think it's the unknown factor, which is why I'm like, I don't know. I could see it happening either way.
Yeah.
When we're talking about Zombie, who we've known as a fighter for, going back to WEC, the pay-per-view for WEC, way back in 2010, so 12 years ago, and Volkanovski, who's been the champion now for a few years, and again, really has not been defeated at his own weight. It's just, you've got such a known quantity, and there's always levels at the top. There's not a whole lot of people who can really compete with that top. I think we know Max Holloway can, again, win or lose, but I think because we have established levels and established familiarity with both these guys, we can kind of figure, okay, I think we think we know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think, again, we think we know what's going to happen, but this is MMA. So
this is why we watch.
Who knows?
But which one I think is actually a lot closer than I think some people tend to think is Sterling and Yan. When we watched that first fight, because I've now watched this fight quite a few times in the last few weeks, I've been writing, might even be published by now, by the time you're listening to this, a long form piece on New York Post, their premium site called Post Sports Plus. You can subscribe for free for 30 days. So you can read my story and then decide what you want to do from there. That's fine. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your money, but that's free. But I've been watching this fight a few times. I spoke with Aljamain a few times. I spoke with his coach, Ray Longo. I spoke with Ali Quinta. So this was really focused on Aljamain. And, sometimes you kind of, you can talk to a fighter enough times, you can kind of start believing some of the things they're saying. But there's some logic to some of the things that Aljamain Sterling has been saying since the fight, which he most definitely was not in control of by the time he took the illegal knee last March to actually get the win. But that fight is actually looking okay for the time that Aljamain really does seem to be fighting more like himself and not totally out of gas, which was such a weird and unexpected thing from Aljamain. It was very out of character. You didn't really expect to see that from him, to actually have already run out of gas that way.
Well, he came out so fast paced.
He did.
Like anybody would run out of gas.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, Clay Guida would not have run out of gas.
That's true.
There's a lot of guys who wouldn't. And I think his conditioning is good. I've never really thought of him as a guy who doesn't have the gas tank. And he's actually got fights where he has even more strikes landed and thrown in fights too. It's just this particular fight, for whatever reason, it didn't work out. He was getting kind of thrown down on his back. This was one of the worst fights that I've ever seen Aljamain Sterling have. And I just don't think that that's going to necessarily repeat itself. I think his performance that time reflected more him not doing well than Petr Yan doing something spectacular. Now, Petr Yan is capable of doing something spectacular too. So as much as I kind of expect in this fight, Aljamain to raise his game and to be more similar to what he was in like round 1, round 2, than what we saw in rounds 3 and 4. Yan is still able to step up as well. I think he can meet that challenge and exceed it. But what that tells me is that this is actually going to be a really close fight.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the combined resumes of these two fighters. And wow.
Very impressive.
They are, I mean, so we all, everybody who has watched MMA since 2017 has seen the footage of Aljo getting absolutely knocked into the previous week by Marlon Moraes's head kick, which actually ended up being a knee.
It was a knee, it landed as a knee, but it was thrown as a kick.
Because Aljo was shooting at the time.
Just happened to be at the wrong time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So everybody's seen that.
Not a fluke. Not a fluke. It's one of those things that didn't necessarily prove who was definitely the better fighter. It didn't go very long. So.
It almost reminded me of when Chris Weidman and Yoel Romero were fighting. And Chris just happened to shoot for a takedown at the exact moment that Yoel threw like a flying knee. And that was one of those. Hey,
look, some of that is timing. Like some of that is, you got to give the credit to the fighter. But like, he didn't even mean to throw the strike that exactly landed that way. It was kind of weird.
But yeah, like you said, though, not a fluke. It was an intentional thrown strike. It wasn't like Aljo ran into like his elbow while Marlon was trying to shake his hand. It was a head kick that was thrown. It just so happened that the knee was what landed because Aljo was shooting at that time. But still, that was when Marlon Moraes was looking unstoppable, looking like he was going to be the next champion. I think he won like his next 2 or 3 fights, or 3 of his next 4, including the Jose Aldo, which the UFC was just like, we're going to pretend that Aldo won that one, actually. But yeah, after losing that, beat Brett Johns, beat Cody Stamann, beat Jimmy Rivera, beat Pedro Munoz, beat Corey Sandhagen in like 2 seconds flat. Minute and a half, less than a minute and a half is when he sunk in that rear naked choke. Right. And then, we know what happened with the Petr Yan fight. Very unfortunate.
It is. And there's obviously a lot of like kind of what happened with that knee. So I had actually a neighbor of mine who he was born in Russia, grew up there a little while, but then like 30 years ago, we're talking about like kind of the fall of the Soviet Union, came to the United States citizen and everything like that. I asked him, okay, can you translate what is happening in the corner? What are they saying to the fighter? Because obviously there was that whole Joe Rogan said, Khabib told me, he said, throw the knee or throw the kick or whatever. And the only thing that I was being told by my Russian speaking neighbor, and this is kind of seems to have been corroborated by some things too, is all he said was just hit him, just hit him. That was all that was said in Russian. There was no particular strike suggested, like a knee or a punch or a kick. It was just that. He doesn't watch MMA too, so he had no idea like kind of the backstory here. So he had no real reason to give me anything other than that. So I thought that was interesting that all he said was hit him. And even Petr Yan said, like, my corner didn't tell me to do that. Like, I did that. So this seems to corroborate everything there, that what I had suggested to me by actually someone in the MMA community was that potentially he thought that Petr Yan thought that because the hand that Aljamain had put down to ground himself after the failed takedown attempt, the hand, he lifted it up, and that maybe he thought, okay, I can throw the knee in there. Maybe
not
he
realizing
just
that
didn't
Aljo was
see
on his...
the knee down.
Yeah.
It's very possible that this was just a total mistake, like a misread of the situation, not even thinking he could throw the knee in like a situation with his knee down. He just threw it at the wrong time. It doesn't excuse it. I mean, it's a foul. It's a problem. Another way that this fight could have actually been handled, and John McCarthy has talked about this on his show. Another way that you can do it, and both of them are viable. DQ is viable. Mark Swift's ruling of a DQ in that fight was totally viable. But it could also have been a technical decision. They could have gone to a technical decision at that point, which is where they end up scoring the partial round of round 4. There was only 31 seconds left, I think, in the round. So we already saw most of that round anyway. That round was going to be a Petr Yan round for sure, 10-9. It wasn't really a 10-8. Like, it may have been going that way potentially if Aljo got himself in real trouble, but he wasn't really in that territory yet. We're just talking about 9. So you put him in a scenario where he's up 2 points on 2 cards, but then it's also tied on the other one. And then you would have to get the point deductions.
Yes, that's
because there's a mandatory point deduction in this scenario. And usually in a scenario like this, it would be like 2 because it's a foul that ends the fight. It depends on the official. Some officials are more or less willing to do that, but really 2 would be the proper protocol here, I would think. And you take 2 points away, that makes it a draw on 2 cards. The third card says Aljo wins, but that doesn't matter because it's the majority. So it would be a majority draw. And in that scenario, Petr Yan would still have kept the belt.
Yep.
It would not have been a victory. Is that the right call there? I don't know. I mean, let me ask you, because you're watching more as a fan than I am. What do you think? Is that the right call, or do you think the way it was handled that night was the way you would have preferred to see it?
It's tricky because on one hand, yeah, that makes sense. Like, let's just go to the scorecards, do a technical decision, because we were at the end of the 4th round.
Yep.
So we were getting to the final round of the fight. We had seen a lot happen in this bout,
and a fight that was most definitely heading in the direction of Petr Yan.
Yes, but then at the same time, you have a guy committing a really bad foul. Like, this was an egregious foul. The first time this has ever happened where a fighter lost the belt due to an illegal blow or a disqualification.
And it doesn't matter if he meant to do it, if he was dirty or not. It really doesn't matter. He still did it.
So I don't know how that would sit with me if after, like, he's the reason that the fight ended the way it did and he gets to retain his belt. Like, I feel like that would sit even worse with me than Aljo getting the belt the way he did. That's less than ideal for everyone involved. You saw Aljo was super upset about it when he was getting the belt wrapped around his waist. Wasn't he crying? He
said to me, he was very confused. When we spoke about this, he just said he was confused. He wouldn't say that he was concussed, but like everyone around him that I spoke to said he was concussed. So yes, he's crying because he's concussed, Yeah. And he's what's going on?
Yeah. He's getting his hand raised, getting the belt wrapped around him. He's like, I was just unconscious. What the hell is happening here?
Yeah.
But like, at the same time, he didn't seem super thrilled about it.
No.
And like, Petr Yan wasn't super thrilled about it, and none of the fans seemed to be very happy.
Petr Yan, he had his fist up. He was celebrating. There's that self-owned basically meme or gif that we're basically going to use forever.
I love that meme. That's like right up there with like my favorite recent MMA memes, alongside Kevin Holland with the thumbs up as he's getting choked, or like as Oliveira's wrapping his arms around his neck.
When I spoke to Aljo, I asked him about that meme. And he's like, what a goof this guy is. He just like couldn't believe it. And he's like, I'm going to start. I got to post that again. And then the next day he actually did post it again.
Yeah. I mean, oh man, I'm looking at, I swapped over to a different tab and I have Petr Yan's resume up. I completely forgot they threw poor Uriah Faber to Petr Yan.
God, yeah, that was a sacrificial lamb. They said, well, he's old, so let's just his record, his resume, it isn't as impressive, really. Honestly, it just isn't. I think he's got time to build it. I actually have a really high regard for Petr Yan and what he can do in this sport, in this division. So I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the day we're talking about the greatest bantamweight of all time. But that day is still very early on him, and his resume doesn't really impress me that much just yet.
It's not, but there are some really good names on it. Like,
sure.
Uriah Faber, past his prime, obviously,
it's
but
just
he's
a name, though.
He's a big name. Jose Aldo's the big one, right? Like Jose Aldo has come down.
It's like you said, he's coming off a loss in that fight.
But he's still, in the time since, he has shown what he can do at bantamweight. He's shown that
100%.
Probably one of the top three.
He's still there, but yeah, it's I don't know. There's still a lot of like with his record. It's just like there's a lot of buts and ifs and things like that.
Corey Sandhagen,
that was an impressive victory.
I mean, Corey Sandhagen, I picked to win that fight. I thought Corey Sandhagen was going to win that, and honestly, John Dodson, Demetrius Johnson told me that is the hardest puncher he's ever fought.
I believe it.
Maybe that's
he
changed.
Knocked out TJ Dillashaw on the Ultimate Fighter finale.
Yeah, that's I don't know. That's an underrated win right there. I've always been a John Dodson fan though. But yeah, you're right. It's not as consistently great. Whereas like Aljamain Sterling just has been fighting murderers. Ever since.
And again, not yet. Yeah, I think Yan he's still very young. Like he's 29.
Oh,
he's got a lot of time in this sport. There's not a lot of champions under 30. Like, yeah, Aljo is not an old guy by any stretch, but he's 32.
Like, just looking, I brought up the bantamweight rankings right now, and say Yan does win this weekend.
Yan does win this weekend.
He has so many great challengers ahead of him. Like, Dillashaw is probably going to be next if he can get healthy.
It makes sense.
Then you have Rob Font that is always kind of knocking on the door. He's probably one fight away. You could see Jose Aldo coming up and challenging again, because that was a competitive fight until that final round when, the Jose Aldo just got pounded into the canvas for like 7 minutes longer than he needed to.
Ugly round. Should have been stopped sooner.
But then you have Merab. You have Dominic Cruz, who's always just one win away from getting a title shot.
Look, and Merab, by the way, is a teammate of Aljamain Sterling.
Mm-hmm.
That is, if Aljo's not in the way, if Aljo doesn't win this fight, it is Petr Yan. It would be very interesting to see kind of the dynamic here between, especially in the current climate of the world, a Russian fighter, a Russian champion against a Georgian challenger. Who the day that I observed Aljamain training, it was actually Merab who brought out a Ukraine flag to take a picture with the whole gym. So there's a lot of kinship there. There's no love lost between Georgians and Russia. If anyone doesn't know the geopolitics,
I'm just looking at these bantamweight rankings, and if Yan wins this fight, he's more than going to have the opportunity to build that resume that you were saying isn't quite on par with what Sterling has done to this point.
Sure.
But this is all up in the air because right now Aljo holds the legitimate title, and
he does, but I don't think anyone necessarily
title.
Views him as the best 135 pounder in the world. I think just my 2 cents coming into the fight, I think it's very hard for people to come into this and say, despite whoever has what belt, who do you think has shown themselves to be the best 135 pounder? You have to look at what happened in that fight.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, rightfully, Aljamain Sterling has the belt. I think it's absolutely justifiable, but that doesn't mean he proved he was better.
That's true.
All
I was saying is we can't write him off.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I think this is a super, super close fight. I think this one's going the distance. I made a pick on my other podcast. I really don't like making a pick here. I really just think this one's going to come down to the wire. I think it's going to come down to whether I think the real key here to this entire fight is let's say for argument's sake, Aljamain's gas tank holds up, which I think last fight was a lot more fluky than it was. I don't know if it's because he only ate 2 pancakes and 2 eggs that whole day and he burned it off like he's saying. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I do think that the gas tank's going to be there, and it's really going to come down to how many times Yan can land the big shot, which is really the key here. Is he has the power. If he lands, he's going to change Aljamain's night. He did it in the first round. He didn't change the night, but he took that round away. It was definitely going to be a Sterling round, and actually one judge still gave it to him. But that was a Yan round after he landed that big shot in the first round. He didn't land the big shot in round 2. And then after that, Sterling was kind of running on fumes. So if he's able to make that happen more often than not, the fight that keeps coming up in my head, and I don't know if you remember this fight, was Michael Bisping and Anderson Silva. Do you remember that fight?
Yes.
So in that fight, Anderson Silva was had Bisping on the ropes at the end of round 3. He was easily in the worst way that any of the fighter was the entire night. But throughout the night, Michael Bisping was able to avoid the big shots most of the time, and he took the rounds. And I could see that happening here too. So I don't know. It comes down to, can Yan do it in 2 or 3 rounds, or can he finish it? I don't know that I'm expecting the type of finishing ability from Aljamain Sterling here as much as I think he has finishing ability, especially on the ground. I just think it'd be really tough here. So yeah, I see this one going 5 rounds, and it's going to be interesting who actually gets their hand up.
Yeah, I think that would probably be in my book. I haven't looked at like the actual betting lines, but that would be my most likely outcome of this fight, is going the distance.
Sure.
I think I'm right there with you.
And Yan is actually a pretty decent favorite here too, if I recall, on the betting lines. And I don't think that is, I think that's definitely ripe for opportunity for bettors. And again, I'm not telling you what to do with your money. I'm not a bettor, so please don't hold me responsible. But I look at that when I see lines that are just out of whack with what I think can happen in the fight. There you go. That's all I would say.
Also interesting to note that we are, according to the UFC pound for pound rankings, this card features 2 of the top 10 pound for pound fighters, only one of which is a champion. I mean, I guess Petr Yan is technically an interim champion, but Alexander Volkanovski is currently number 3 on the pound for pound rankings behind Usman and Adesanya. And then Petr Yan is currently number 9 in the UFC's official pound for pound ranking. So interesting to note there.
I'll say this. I'm not to steal thunder, but I think the UFC rankings are really stupid. And I think the panel of panelists that they use, the media members, so to speak, are very few of them are from like websites that you would know, or outlets you would know, or names you would know. So for me as a media member, it's very hard to put a lot of stake in them. I like to go by, right now, my favorite media driven rankings are the ones put up by MMA Fighting.
I would agree with that.
I think they have an excellent panel of actual real experts whose names you know, and they discuss it and everything like that. That pound for pound is obviously, it's kind of a silly thing anyway. And I don't even look beyond like the top 5 because it's like, who cares? But in the top 5, yeah, Alexander Volkanovski. You know, if we want to talk a little about pound for pound real quick, then I would say, yeah, him being 3 makes a lot of sense right behind those 2 guys. I think it's got to be Kamaru Usman, and then I think it's got to be Israel Adesanya, and then Volkanovski. I feel like that's a really good top 3 pound for pound.
Well, then you will disagree with MMA Fighting's pound for pound rankings, which have Volkanovski.
Oh, they're a bunch of hacks.
5, but they have Usman, Adesanya 1 and 2, like the UFC does. Mm-hmm. Then they have Ngannou at 3 and Oliveira at 4.
I can understand it. I think I would disagree respectfully with those hacks. No, no, I respectfully disagree. I do think you can put Volkanovski there at number 3. But I get it. I can understand it. It's, theirs is a cumulative ranking there too. There's a bunch of people on that panel. Maybe someone agreed with me too.
Yeah, it's it's definitely an interesting fight. It's one that I'm more excited for it, like I said before, than the headliner, Volkanovski Korean Zombie, just because I think that this is going to be the most competitive fight of the 3 top fights that we have. And I think a lot of people are writing it off just because of the aftermath of the first fight that they had, where people decided like, oh, well, Aljo's a fake champion and he was just acting when he got kneed in the head. So, and now he's walking around and like playing it up. Like he's doing what he should be doing. He should be playing it up and like being like, yep, I'm the champion. That guy fouled me. I win. Like he should be doing that because that's going to build people to wanting to see this second fight. And I think it just went on for far too long because if he had to have surgery and everything, which isn't his fault, he should do what he needs to do to get healthy and hold on to this belt.
He told me he'd planned that surgery, win, lose, or draw anyway. He was going to have it.
But I think that it just went on for too long with not having an undisputed unified title in that division. That is just, I mean, it's the same thing. Like people kind of got disenchanted with Conor, outside of his personal problems as well. But, it's just like he held up just such a talent rich division full of huge names by not defending his belt. And I think that's what people kind of got annoyed at with Aljo. Only on top of that, he also, in a lot of people's minds, did not legitimately win the title. So I think that's why people are just kind of like writing him off as Yan comes back to reclaim what they think is rightfully his.
You kind of touched upon why you were excited about this fight earlier, that it really is going to settle the best bantamweight in the world. This is one of the most high stakes fights of the year, I think, in the sense that it really does settle something. I think you had that with Francis Ngannou and Cyril Gane because there was some intrigue there with the kind of the young buck and the kind of the play at there. They're the former champion, not the former champion, the former teammate, excuse me. That was an interesting one, but I think this is even bigger because we have basically a 3-year time frame where there was at least some kind of question over who was the top bantamweight in the world, because you go all the way back to TJ Dillashaw was the champion, right? He lost to Henry Cejudo at flyweight, tests positive for EPO, decides to relinquish the belt, would have been taken anyway. So then you get Cejudo coming up, challenges Marlon Moraes for the championship belt, the vacant belt. It's a flyweight against a bantamweight, even though it was someone who beat him at a different weight. There's still a little like kind of question mark there. And then the only fight Cejudo takes before he retires is Dominic Cruz, who hadn't fought in, at that point, 4 years, 3.5 years. Is way too long for you to justifiably say he was some sort of test or something like that. Then he drops the belt, retires. We're not seeing him again. And then it's like, look, now we have this vacant title that's contested by, I think Yan was like number 3 or 4 at the time. And Aldo was 6 or even as low as 10, depending on whose rankings you go with. And then you had the other fight where it was Aljamain against Corey Sandhagen, and they were really like more like 2 and 3. It made a lot more sense for that one to be the title belt on merit than the other fight. So there's a lot of like discrepancies there. Now we finally have, I think people most definitely agree that Aljo and Yan are the 2 best bantamweights in the world. They'll finally decide which one deserves to go first here definitively. Yes. And then we can move forward.
Yeah. And I think that's what I'm excited for. That plus what I said earlier about like, let's just get this division moving again, like at the top, because, I've said it a few times across the show. There's so many great names, so many great contenders. I just want to see who rises to the top. I want to get more challengers in there to fight. I don't want them to just have to worry about like, all right, well, I guess I should take another fight because like there's still a logjam at the top. Like we've seen at heavyweight where Stipe and DC were just fighting each other once a year for like 3 years. And then, DC took a Derek Lewis fight on short notice so he could headline MSG. And then other than that, those were the only title fights happening in the heavyweight division over the course of 3 years. And then Stipe did the same thing with Ngannou. He's just like, all right, I'm just going to fight Ngannou and then not fight again. And then like, it just happens so often now where like we get these log jams at the most exciting divisions. Like that was happening when like, remember like the Stipe DC trilogy was happening while Ngannou was just wrecking shop all throughout the heavyweight division. Just anybody who stood in front of him was just basically a dead man walking. And it took him way longer than he should have for him to get that second title shot.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to reveal itself with at least one contender in the bantamweight division. Like we saw it with Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson never got his undisputed title shot. And I think a large portion of that is because Conor held up that division for, what was it, 2 years that he held the belt without defending?
Yeah. It was so stupid that they let him hold on to that. For the way that they treat other champions, it was ridiculous the way they actually treated Conor. And like, I get it, like he's the money coming in and everything like that, but he didn't need the belt anymore. Like that was the thing that kind of irked me the most. And I really kind of I want to move away from Conor and all that. But the thing that irked me was just the fact that they didn't realize he didn't need that title to sell. Mm-hmm. We just wanted to, like, when I say we, I don't necessarily mean me, but people in general were interested in him versus Mayweather because it was him and because it was Mayweather. No one cared what belts they had.
Yeah, 100%.
You take that belt away, it's not going to cost you 100,000 buys. It doesn't matter.
It's such a weird and bizarre thing. Or just take it away from him after the Mayweather fight. Yeah. Like, it's like, all right, well, you have like, tell him like you have 4 months to defend this title, and then if he doesn't, all right, well, we're going to strip him and do a vacant title shot.
It was,
but I'm excited that we are no longer going to have to worry about this logjam. Fingers crossed.
Sure.
Though it would be absolutely hilarious if this ended on another illegal blow.
Yeah. let's look, as a community, let's pray to the MMA gods that we just get a definitive result. Okay. Yes. I think that's something we can all unite behind, right?
Yes.
No one out there rooting for a no contest or something, I hope. Weirdos.
We have a little bit more to cover with 273. We spent a lot of time on those top three fights.
Yeah.
Real quick, because we do need to touch on gaming before we wrap up here.
I want to touch on gaming. It's not that we need to. I like gaming, man. I know you're not a big gamer, but
I'm not a big gamer. You're right. What's another fight that you're looking forward to on this card? We'll just touch on them real quick.
I want to see Ian Gary again. I liked his debut. I was at the Garden for his debut. Got a really nice close seat to watch him in action.
Awesome.
I like what he brings to the table with his hands. I think he has some work to do with his striking defense. That's what I would like to see some progress in. He's a prospect. This is a prospect fight. For sure. Him against Darian Weeks is I think an appropriate matchup for a prospect like him, because Weeks he's got some boxing under his belt as well. I think he actually had a boxing match last year before his UFC debut where he gave a real good run at Brian Barberina. I don't know if you remember that fight, but that was a solid debut fight for a guy who's still very young in the sport. So I'm hoping that this plays out as some sort of striking match only. I don't know how it's necessarily going to play out. I'm not entirely familiar with the entire games of both Ian Gary and Darian Weeks, but I know that they can both strike, and I'd love to see them kind of just hash it out and see, has Ian Gary made any strides with his striking? Does it matter at this stage? Maybe he's still got more time, and I just think it'll be interesting who comes out of this one. But I really am particularly interested in Gary as a prospect.
Yeah, Ian Gary is definitely one that I have been waiting to see his actual debut for, and then like he came in and handled his business and looked good.
I'm more interested in him as a fighter than Paddy Pimblett. Pimlett's got a personality, but I think Pimlett's as a fighter, I really let's say a fighter who can go on to do things. I think Paddy Pimblett brings the action in the cage, but I don't know that he's going to be like a championship star. I think he's someone who's going to be more of an action star, fun kind of fighter, which is great too. But
yeah, Ian Gary, definitely a huge prospect for the UFC, and I'm excited to see what he does with this fight. I'm speaking of big prospects in the UFC.
Yeah, what do you want to say?
I'm going to say Piera Rodriguez. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Taking on Kay Hansen, who's another prospect in the UFC.
She's got some fights under her belt now, but yeah, she's still a prospect too.
But Piera Rodriguez coming in, she's undefeated, and according to, I forget which site I was looking at, but it was saying like she's like the number 2 pound for pound women's fighter in all of Latin America.
Is that sounds like a Tapology thing?
I think it was Tapology.
Yeah,
but like she's looking like a pretty nice prospect, and I'm excited to see what she did. She does. She won her Contender Series fight, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what she does against Kay Hansen.
And this is back down at, I believe, 115 pounds. I think Kay Hansen's last fight was at 125. So she's back down at her more appropriate weight, which is good to see.
Also, that is the second fight happening. Women's strawweight fight, Piera Rodriguez versus Kay Hansen. And then also, I'm just going to give a shout out to Mackenzie Dern versus Ticia Torres, because that's a good fight.
Sure. That's an interesting one. That's on the main card. I actually spoke to Mackenzie the other day for my Q&A feature. And she said this is like the fight where she kind of realized she needed to come in. I think after her last fight, she kind of decided she was going to do this. She was coming in with kind of a lot of the baggage of thinking about home, her daughter, her husband, especially her daughter. Like, is she crying? Is she doing all that? She's trying to compartmentalize now, fight week, and get her mindset right. Look, fighters are going to tell themselves a billion things, but I would think that at least being able to focus specifically on that has to help any athlete to be able to compartmentalize and separate home and work.
Yeah, and let's not forget that it was against Marina Rodriguez.
Oh, absolutely. She lost that fight. I don't know that I would have picked Mackenzie Dern to win that fight anyway. I have a very high opinion of Marina Rodriguez.
Yeah, and also being able to, like, I think that Mackenzie Dern looks a lot better nowadays training with Perillo.
Yeah, Jace Perillo, absolutely.
I think that her striking has just come so far, because like when she came into the UFC, she was very much a specialist, and she has rounded out her skill set so well. I mean, she's still an incredible submission artist, but
her bread and butter is still the ground, and she knows it. I mean,
absolutely.
She seems to. We didn't even talk about it, but I'm pretty sure in other interviews she spoke about she'd like to get it to the ground.
Yeah, I mean, of course she does. That's where she knows that probably nobody else can hang with her, right? Like, is there anybody else
on the ground?
Yeah,
no,
exactly. Like,
she is a world. She was talking to me about wanting to hit her Choco Plata, which is something that she hit in LFA, and like her second fight on Montana De La Rosa. They were both at LFA. But I don't know if you've seen this, Brian, but the Choco Plata, you can look up her LFA fight against De La Rosa on YouTube. She starts it out as an omoplata, and then she's able to, while maintaining the omoplata, lock in a rear naked choke and get the choke finish.
I'm looking it up now.
The Choco Plata.
The Choco,
and she said that's her favorite move. She would like to hit it in the UFC too.
That's
like a goal.
Tying her opponent into a pretzel, basically.
Yes.
And also choking them unconscious.
It is a fascinating move. I love crazy jiu-jitsu chokes and things like that. Like, my favorite move is the Gogo Plata. I don't know if you know what I mean, but I love Gogo Platas. That has not been hit in the UFC yet either. It's been hit by fighters who've been in the UFC, but not in the octagon. And I'm waiting for that. By the way, Mackenzie Dern, I asked her favorite game, because I said, "Hey, are you a gamer?" She's like, "Yeah, I like games." She said her favorite game, especially when she was younger, was Crash Bandicoot.
Nice.
She liked hitting the goals and things like that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. I could see that though. Like that's almost in line with her personality.
Yeah, I think so. She was so nice and friendly, and it was a great conversation we had for a while. We went on about 10 minutes longer than I had expected to or suggested it would, because she gives very long answers and things. And I said, thanks. I hope you didn't mind at the end. And she's like, "Oh, I talked for a long time. I'm sorry." I was like, "No, it's fine. It's okay." I hope I didn't waste your time,
Yeah, she seems really nice.
Yeah. And I also, before this fight, I spoke to we haven't spoken about him, but Julio Arce. He's a local guy for New York, Queens guy. So I asked him his favorite games too. And he said he's currently playing Elden Ring and he loves it.
Yeah, that's
everyone's playing it. Everybody I've spoken to is playing it. It's kind of wild.
That is definitely like the kind of universal experience in gaming right now, where everybody is playing it. It's kind of fading a little bit, but like, if you remember, like late February, early March, it was just everywhere, all over social media, and like people are still playing it. It's just not as much in the zeitgeist as it was like a month ago.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the natural course, isn't it? Are you playing it much still, or have you kind of moved away?
I haven't played a ton of games lately. It's mostly been the writing about games part on my end lately.
Like I said, you're not much of a gamer. You're more of a writer.
I have been playing, and I've kept up with Elden Ring a little bit, but I've also been playing a game called Shredders. Not Shredder's Revenge, which is the Ninja Turtles game that we're both very much looking forward to.
Oh, yes, we are.
But Shredder's is a snowboarding game that I found on Xbox Game Pass.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I used to love like SSX and 1080
SSX
snowboarding.
is terrific.
And so I downloaded this and I was like, it's okay. It runs kind of like crap on my Xbox Series S, but and it has some really weird writing. I tweeted out a couple. Yeah, like I tweeted out a couple of clips, and it's like such a random thing. Like it's like a kind of more of like a realistic like physics type of snowboarding game. Like it's casual in the sense that like, oh, you can land stuff that you would never be able to land in real life.
Okay.
But like on one thing, like there's a cutscene. It's like the third cutscene in the game, and it's like, oh, I have this little version of me, and he's like holding him in his hand, and it's like he's like talking with like this little like 10-inch tall version of himself, and it's like we're going places with this, and it's like such a weird, bizarre thing that I don't know. I was not prepared for like a jarring cutscene like that, where it's like, oh, I thought like we were just like all hanging out and like snowboarding, and now all of a sudden this guy has like a miniature version of himself that he can carry around with him, and it's like everybody else can see it too.
That sounds like if Kojima had made a snowboarding game. Am I wrong?
It would probably go something like that.
Yeah.
Although then, there Norman Reedus would pop up, or Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
And I've also been playing Forza Horizon 5, which
yes, that's like your go-to like racing game, right?
That was my game of the year last year, which I never thought a racing game would be my game of the year, but that game is so good. Just such a great open world racing game, and the world is just so much fun. It's the way I usually describe it to people is that game does it gets out of its way. It gets out of your way to deliver the fun. Like it lets the player get to the fun with no impediments whatsoever, and it does it in the way that few games, not even just racing games, few games in general do. They just let you go do what you want to do and have a good time doing it.
That's awesome.
Speaking
of Kojima, by the way, one thing you kind of reminded me of talking about, getting out of your way. I wouldn't say that Death Stranding does the same thing, but playing Death Stranding, the director's cut of it on PS5, I was able to boot the game up and get into moving my character around like within 30 seconds. It was wild. That was one of the most amazing things about that game.
It's one of those games that gives you a lot of freedom. Like that was one of the appeals to me. Actually, I still haven't put in a significant amount of time into Death Stranding, but one of the appeals to me was that like people were like, oh, well, if you like Breath of the Wild and like the freedom that it gave you, you'll like Death Stranding. And I was like, okay, I could understand that, but like,
yeah, I don't know about that.
I mean, this was early on, and
sure, okay.
After Death Stranding came out, when people were just looking for an analog for it, but
there is none.
I want to play it at some point. I really do. But now it's like I have like 7 games that came out this year that I still need to play. Like I'm so far behind. I have such a disastrous backlog at this point.
Oh, me too. I mean, and it keeps getting bigger, for me too, because there was a bunch of games that were on sale. I want to say the last week or two that I ended up purchasing too. So that's now I've just over encumbered myself, and I'm gonna have to, figure out a better way to balance these games. I definitely am not playing. I played a lot of MLB The Show last year, and I got very hooked on the Diamond Dynasty, and that I think killed me as far as being able to catch up on backlog. And I'm like committing myself now, especially this year, and maybe even for good, to just not playing these like grind them out, gear collecting, card collecting, all these kind of collecting games, especially the online variety. And I'm trying to play more of and I prefer these games anyway, solo experiences, story-based experiences. Right now I'm back to playing God of War for PS4 on my PS5. This is my second run through New Game Plus.
How's it run on PS5, by the way?
Butter. It's great. I played through when I played it the first time, like my first regular run on PS4, I played like probably on easy mode, I would say, because I just kind of wanted to experience it and go through it and really enjoy it. Then the second time, my New Game Plus, I played it on Give Me God of War, which is the hardest difficulty. And to do that on New Game Plus, especially where everything steps up, the enemies are stepped up, to go all the way to the hardest difficulty. Like, you couldn't get through very easily the very first encounter of the game, but I stuck with it. And that was probably playing through to conclusion. That was one of my like best gaming accomplishments as far as difficulty in like the last 10 years at the very least.
Yeah. I mean, that game doesn't mess around.
No, it doesn't.
It gets tricky, especially near the end. And like, did you hunt down the Valkyries?
Yeah. Well, actually, so I don't think I hunted down the Valkyries on my New Game Plus run on that harder difficulty, but it was hard enough on easy mode in the first playthrough. I'm doing it again now. So I'm like a little more than halfway through my second New Game Plus, but I actually am playing on story difficulty because I'm just trying to collect gear and I'm trying to upgrade my gear and everything. I just want scap slag is the type of thing you got to collect, right? So I'm trying to get as much of that as I can so that I can upgrade everyone to the fullest. Then I'm going to play one more, definitely at some point, New Game Plus run, hardest difficulty, best gear, and I'm going to try and clear, the Valkyries and everything. I want to give myself the best chance against them when I get to that point.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've got an end game in place. I'm going to play through this game at least 4 times. I love this game. I really can't get enough.
It's a great game. And I will say that you can't overstate how much better these games run on a PS5. Like, that's why I was asking, because when I went back and replayed Ghost of Tsushima or booted Ghost of Tsushima back up, it felt like, oh, this is like a next gen version of this game, even though it was just like the PS4 version running on PS5. And then of course the PS5 like director's cut came out.
And that made it even better. Yeah. I played Tsushima only on PS5. But I did play it before and after the director's cut, like you're talking about. And yeah, there's a noticeable difference for sure.
It might be the most beautiful game I've ever played. It is absolutely gorgeous.
Just fascinatingly gorgeous. And I love kind of that feudal Japan aesthetic of any game like that. You're at least going to get me like, all right, well, what do we have here? Like, I definitely want to know what it's about. But that one, I don't know how you felt about Tsushima. Was that like your game of the year that year?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah, it beat out Last of Us Part 2 for me.
I didn't play Last of Us 2, but Tsushima, I really love it, but I kind of acknowledge some of its faults and I just don't care.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it feels honestly like, if you look at the Assassin's Creed franchise, there are 2 distinct eras. There's like the original era where it was like Assassin's Creed 1 through Assassin's Creed Syndicate, where like there were very specific gameplay elements and very specific like loops that you would go through. And then starting with Assassin's Creed Origins and then carried through the Odyssey and Valhalla, that's like a new era of Assassin's Creed.
It's got the RPG, it leans heavily into that element.
I think Ghost of Tsushima reminds me of like everything I ever wanted from that classic era of Assassin's Creed. That's almost the way that game plays. And it's also the setting I always wanted for Assassin's Creed, which is feudal Japan. And
you know what it really does that Assassin's Creed I wish had learned a long time ago that I didn't want to do? It doesn't make me follow everybody like through like crowded markets and like get spotted and have to redo that again. Those were easily the worst things. And
the trailing missions.
Yeah, the trailing. Exactly. Thank you. But suck. Also another thing that had bothered me too about like Assassin's Creed games was just the frustrating, like it was fun climbing. I really like climbing, but also sometimes it didn't do what I wanted it to do. And it was just like, what the heck are you doing? I don't want to go here. And it would like be frustrating. Never want to jump off this building because they didn't do as much of it.
Yeah. Very good game. It's one of my favorite games of the last generation, Ghost of Tsushima, since we're on that topic.
Sure.
We are getting near the end of the show, Scott. I think I know that you had sent me a message about PlayStation Plus because of these new PlayStation Plus tiers. Yes. But I guess you found a deal.
Yeah, so Wario64, who you shouted out on the show before, rightfully, because he's really just an imperative follow if you're a gamer, tweeting out deals and things like that. So he had tweeted out, essentially, the understanding is that if you were to buy a PlayStation Now subscription, like let's say for a year, you could get that at $60. You buy it through PlayStation's website is the way I did it. I had to do it through the browser. So you do that based on the language that is being used from PlayStation, from Sony, is that when PlayStation Now goes away and becomes PlayStation Plus, whatever it will be, your account from PlayStation Now converts to a PlayStation Premium account, that top tier $120 version. So I went and pulled the trigger on a $60 PlayStation Now, which in 2 months will convert to PlayStation Premium. $60 value or $120 value for $60.
At least you hope so.
At least that's my understanding. That's my understanding based on Wario 64. I went and did it. If you trust Wario 64, go find
I trust him with my life.
Trust him with your life. That's right. You should trust him with your children. Not my children, though, but your children, whoever you are out there. I went and pulled the trigger, and I do think I'm willing to say if this works or not. It's not like my money's going to disappear. Like, they're going to find a way. So it makes sense that this is what's going to happen. I'm very excited to see. And I looked into a little bit with PlayStation Now, like what games are available. I've never tried it before. I don't know if you had, Brian. Had you tried PlayStation Now? Yeah. So I finally got the chance to look, and I'm like, all right, what do we have? Like, what do I have access to now? And I'm not playing anything because I'm playing God of War, but the gold mine that I found of old games was fascinating. One of which, I told you about this, Brian, is the Bellator Onslaught game that is available on PlayStation Now. Now, I didn't play it yet, but Brian, I think you and I probably ought to give this a shot, right? Like, at the very least, I will because I have access to it. But if you're
at the very least, you should.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I will not.
Did you ever play it back in the day? Do you remember it?
I remember it. I remember getting abysmal reviews.
I remember it too. I'm going to go into this fully expecting to waste an hour of my time, but I'm going to do it for you, dear listener, because I'm going to tell you what it's like playing this old, terrible MMA game today.
I mean, that was when...
It was 9 years ago that it came out, by the way.
Okay, so that was 2012? 2013? Okay, so that was in the period where we were in a UFC game drought, I believe, because
I think UFC came back the next year with EA.
Yeah, so the Undisputed franchise was dead, rest in peace, but the license had transferred to EA Sports, but they had not yet finished their first game yet. Yeah, so because I think 2010 was the last Undisputed game. Yeah, that sounds right. It might have been 2011.
You know what? No, that's not true. Definitely one came out, I want to say 2012 or so.
Yeah, you're right.
I was not living with my parents anymore. I'd moved out and had an apartment.
Because there was one that I think was just called 2010, and then they put out UFC Undisputed 3.
Yes.
After that. But all that to say, I'm not going to be playing that game. Bellator MMA Onslaught. I mean, unless they have a flawlessly modeled Scott Coker, which I don't know what
this
the
was
timeline
pre Scott Coker.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I think we're still talking about Bjorn Rebney and the season.
Well, they better have an impeccably modeled Bjorn Rebney.
I can't wait to see who is in the game. I don't even remember.
Look it up. Look it up.
I mean, I can give you a full report next week. You be sure to tune that one in. I'll tell you everything about this terrible.
By the way, I also looked up while you were talking. I decided I wasn't going to pay attention to one of your answers.
That's fine. I'm not worth listening to.
Because it was driving me crazy. Have I seen Train to Busan? And I completely confused it for something else. I have not seen this movie, but I've heard amazing things. So just to clear that up.
Maybe you should watch that one, and then you can report on that.
Maybe I will, if I can find it. Let's look up the roster here. I'm going to read you the complete Bellator MMA Onslaught roster. According to this website,
I hope it's not long.
There are 7 fighters on the roster.
The whole roster. Oh God, what do we have? Who are they?
Pat Curran.
Okay.
Joe Warren, Daniel Strauss, Ronnie Mann. Oh wait, no, the 8 fighters. I'm sorry, they lumped the Pitbull brothers.
7's a weird number.
They lumped the Pitbull brothers together, Ricky and Patricio, Michael Chandler, and Marlon Sandro.
Oh, I enjoyed Marlon Sandro back when he was fighting.
But 8 fighters?
Well, I'm definitely going to play as Michael Chandler.
And I want
to see what that's about.
There's a fighter creator. I mean, again, this was just one website that I found, but believe it or not, doesn't have a huge following, this game.
I'm stunned, personally.
But hey, you can have Chandler fight both of the Pitbull brothers, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
I could do that. That sounds like a thing. I'll probably have enough time to play, a match against everybody as Michael Chandler. And then just
if I do download this game, or if I do get that PlayStation Now deal that you got, I might check it out. Just
I think
because
you have, seriously,
now
if you do the deal, you have to play. You owe it to our listeners to play.
Because now it's more intriguing to me when I find out there's like 8 fighters on the roster.
I know it sounds like the train wreck. It's like watching a bad movie. Like you have to check it out like at some point.
I'm looking up. I don't know how many fighters are on the EA Sports UFC roster, but I mean it's in the hundreds, I would think.
Yeah, I would think so because there's definitely more than like 10 fighters per division.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's going to be a ton in there. There might be 200 fighters on there for all I know.
Did I ever tell you I did old school style tournaments in EA Sports UFC 4?
No.
I ran old school bracket style tournaments. It's a headline that I did of what if the UFC did 8-man tournaments in the year 2021.
Okay.
I used EA Sports UFC 4 to predict how these tournaments will play out. You tell me if any of these are surprises of who would actually win these tournaments. I'll run down real quick.
All right.
Strawweight, Rose Namajunas. That's not a surprise.
Makes sense.
Flyweight, Caitlin Chukagian.
Yeah, that's a little surprising. I would put that as an upset.
Lauren Murphy beat Valentina, by the way, in the semifinals of that tournament.
That's how we saw that fight happen too.
Exactly. Bantamweight, Jermaine Durandamy, and
she's talented. I can see it.
She took out Amanda Nunes in the final.
I mean, we saw that not happen, but she's at least like I can understand it more than Caitlin Chukagian coming out of featherweight or flyweight.
Speaking of things that did not happen, men's flyweight champion Cody Garbrandt.
Yeah,
that didn't happen.
No, that didn't.
But man, okay, let's just keep going. Bantamweight, Petr Yan prediction. Okay, that's feasible. Featherweight,
absolutely.
Volkanovski.
Yep.
He took out Holloway in the final, so that's a very feasible way that bracket played out.
Absolutely.
Played out twice. Lightweight, Michael Chandler takes out Justin Gaethje in the final.
And Khabib, I'm assuming, is retired.
Khabib, I didn't know. It was current UFC rankings is what I used for this.
Okay.
Welterweight, Vicente Luque.
Hey, probably not, but you never know.
Took out Usman and then took out Stephen Thompson in the finals.
Wonderboy, all right.
Who Wonderboy beat Masvidal in the semifinals to get to the finals.
Okay.
185, Adesanya.
Yeah.
Taking out Whitaker in the finals, which, you could see that happening for sure. Light heavyweight, Jan Blachowicz.
Yeah,
taking out Glover Teixeira in the finals, which is it's interesting that Glover and Jan both made it to the finals, and that was like the next fight up.
I like it.
And then heavyweight, Derek Lewis beating Cyril Gane in the finals.
Well, we saw that not happen too. So
no.
Yeah, I think that played out the way it ought to have too.
But the first round, so I had it seeding, and the first round fight, Derek Lewis beat John Jones by KO, beat Jairzinho Rosenstrike by KO, and then beat Cyril Gane by KO. So we didn't see any of that happen.
No, we did not.
But yeah, so that was an article I actually wrote. It took me a long ass time to simulate all of those fights and watch all of them and capture GIFs from all of them.
Oh God, you had to get GIFs from every single one. Jeez.
I didn't do every single one, but like I was recording stuff and like making highlights and everything.
Sure.
But yeah, go check that out. It's using EA Sports UFC 4 to predict how UFC tournaments will play out in 2021 on GameInformer.com. If you want to see all of the in-depth results. I mean, this is from August of last year, so it's not the most up-to-date stuff, but I was just basically comparing who was the current champion in real life versus who was the prediction, and then also checking in with what were the fights of the night. And I gave like brief rundowns of each bracket of like what were like the highlights of each tournament.
Sure.
There are some gifs of like some brutal knockouts. So if you want to see poor Karolina Kowalkiewicz, I think it is. No, it's not.
No, she hasn't been ranked for a while. She's been in a bad way her career.
Yeah, but yeah, it was a fun thing to do, but also it took a long time.
I can only imagine. I meant to tell you too, Brian. Last night I went to finally see the Uncharted movie.
Oh, really?
I didn't think I was going to get to theaters, but finally, like, I got through kind of my busy period with work, and it was still in theaters. So I'm like, I'm going. So I went, and obviously no spoilers. I won't spoil anything for anybody, but I have to say I was happy enough with it. And I would find myself while I'm watching the movie, I'm like, could this be better? Like, does Uncharted have true potential to be like a truly great film franchise? And I'm like, you know what? I don't know that it even does. I think it's about as good, probably could do even better. You could probably do a better sequel. This is more of an origin story, you know,
sure.
But I don't know that it's going to be the type of, it's not going to be Indiana Jones. It's not going to be, it's a knockoff of Indiana Jones, and it's its own thing, but it's also kind of in that vein. It's fun. I had a good time with it. That's all I needed it to be.
Exactly. And like I said this in my review back when I went and saw it, and it was basically like, I liked the action scenes so much because they had the ability to surprise me, where the story absolutely did not. The story was like, all right, I saw that coming a million miles away.
Yeah.
Every single time there was like a thing, but like the action scenes still had the ability to be like, oh, that's cool. Like, I can't believe they're doing that. Especially the final action scene.
Yes,
It was
in
like,
the final
what?
act where things happened that you don't see in other movies.
No, not at all.
And I really enjoyed that. Like, I had that distinct thought too while I'm watching. I'm like, I don't think I've seen this before.
I remember even thinking, like, even in a series like Uncharted that is known for its giant, impressive set piece moments, this is maybe too extreme even for that, because it was so over the top and so like such a wild premise. But like, it was fun. That's the best endorsement I can give that movie. It was a fun ride. I think Tom Holland, it took me a while to see him as Nathan Drake, but once I did, I really saw him as Nathan Drake. It was Mark Wahlberg that I had a problem always placing as Sully. It was always like, oh, Nathan Drake's hanging out with Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, definitely. And at one point, and I don't think this is really spoilers or anything, but at some point, a certain character says, "Say hi to your brother for me." And all I could think of was the Mark Wahlberg talks to animals. Say hi to your mother for me.
Oh, I was thinking,
but it is not Mark Wahlberg who's involved in this conversation. So it's kind of like,
talking about Donnie?
You should have just had him say hi to your brother for me. Just find a way. That would have been fun. I would have really liked that.
That would have been funny. Kind of like you've seen Spider-Man No Way Home, right?
Yes, I have.
Where they had some say the line moments in that movie where it's like, oh, there's a nod to that meme.
There you go.
And
it makes sense.
But yeah, so then speaking of movies that are coming out this week, before we wrap up here, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Very excited to have more people see this movie and be able to talk to people about it, because I enjoyed it a lot. I've been doing a lot of coverage of it, so like I'm super like embedded in it. I'm finally emerging out the other side of like my Sonic the Hedgehog 2 coverage hole that I've been in. But hey,
that's a good hole for you to be in, Mr. Sonic fan.
Absolutely it is. And like I said, I'm excited to see what other people think of it. You said you recently showed your kids the first Sonic movie.
Yeah. So like last week I was thinking about it, right? That particular weekend I said, okay, let's watch it. Like I told my kids about it and they're like, okay, yeah, let's watch it. As they watched it, they were really into it. They were super into it. And then like the moment it ended, they like to draw. They immediately ran to their papers and their crayons and they got them out and they drew Sonic, and my youngest drew Sonic and Tails. He liked that Tails is orange because orange is his favorite color. So,
awesome.
Yeah, they're all about it. Now, we'll definitely take them to movies to see the second movie. I don't know when we'll go. Probably not opening weekend, but I'll tell you, talking with other parents of young children, they're definitely trying to figure out when they can take their kids. So it sounds like there's probably maybe a grassroots, like not grassroots, but like at least on the people that I speak to, it certainly seems like there's a hunger for this movie, and that I bet you it's going to do really well.
I would venture it will. I think that like the first movie had a lot of kind of pessimism and skepticism coming into it, especially with that initial character design. And they fixed that. People went and saw it. They're like, oh, that was actually really fun. And then I think the second movie, it has it's not flawless by any means, but it is a better movie overall, and it has a lot more respect for the source material. And I'm excited for people to see it and like be able to talk to other fans of it about like the plot points and everything.
But I think this is our show, right, for the week. I think we've covered all the bases we needed to. So, if you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening to us. Of course, that helps the show grow. While you're at it, would you kindly follow our social handles at Brian P. Shea and at Scott_Fontana on Twitter and Instagram.
Thank you so much for listening. Go check out Scott's incredible write-up about Aljamain Sterling. And if you want to reach us with questions, feedback, topics you'd like to hear about, or just letting us know what you're hyped about, hit us up at groundandpwnedpod@gmail.com or groundandpwned on Twitter. Until then, enjoy the fights, enjoy the games, and we will talk to you next week.